For your consideration for Awesome Games Done Quick 2023, here is a commentary of my submission for the any percent category of Frogger 2 for the Game Boy Color. Frogger 2 is a Game Boy Color game that came out in the year 2000 and runs with a top-down adventure angle, where you must navigate all the frogs as quickly as possible. Now, in the case of a game like Frogger 2, there are a lot of very unusual routes that can be taken as opposed to the conventional ways that most runners tackle the game. And in the case of Frogger 2, there are a lot of very inventive methods to undo a lot of what makes the courses very difficult, with the exception of one world, which I'll be talking about right now. A lot of the hardest parts of this game come in the form of World 1, where if you make one wrong movement on the fastest movement tech, you will probably get killed off by one of the vehicles. So, in the case of a good number of these levels, you'll probably see slightly different routes being practiced out when preparing for this event and when showing it off at the event itself. Frogger has a couple of cases where you will have to wait just a little bit, but the waiting time is what I'd like to describe as a mini auto-scroller, since the waiting period doesn't last very long, but it's just enough to rest your hands and prepare for the next set of movements. Usually on levels that are not too difficult, but may have some pressure to get to a certain platform in time before you die. Now, in the case of World 1, which is, of course, Frog Pond, specifically levels 1, 4, 5, and 7, there's a lot of pressure to hit certain cycles on time. Otherwise, you'll have to improvise some extra strategies later down the pipeline. So, there may be some safety strats taken. This one is not the fastest strat that you saw for the previous level. There's actually a faster strat that was discovered, but it hasn't been successfully implemented into a world record run since this game is very brutal. And if you make one single mistake, the run usually gets lost, since there's not a lot of extra tech that can be thought of without taking seriously dangerous risks. And we're getting to the point in Frogger 2 where there are quite a few safe strats where the run can still be pretty respectable and be under 15 minutes comfortably, but there's also a lot of places where you can die. In the case of level 7, I'm taking a pretty dangerous route where we're having to travel across a couple of conveyor belts while catching the cycle to take some intentional deaths to the bats and the spiders. You'll see a few more examples of those in the later layer levels where you have to collect all the gems, and that's exclusive to only those levels, unless you decide to pick the all gems category instead of the any percent category, which I'll list in the description below, which has slightly different routing that's based around getting the gems for every single level as quickly as possible. Now, in the case of these levels that you're seeing right here, there's a bunch of shadow tiles that will flash where you're supposed to go, and if you miss the pattern, you will die. So that could be a place where I could play it a little bit more comfortably. It could be a good place for calling off donations, stuff like that, where I'm in waiting or following the leader or doing what I like to call Frogger 2 Game Boy Color's equivalent of Simon Says would be a perfect time to read quite a few of those off. Because there's not too much to explain about those. They're pretty straightforward, and most of the time you're going to be focused on sort of just regrouping yourself so that you can prepare for the next level. Now, in the case of this level, you saw that I took a pretty easy strat, although there are a few places where you can risk losing the run. Those few moments are probably enough for me to believe that I won't take every fast strat in this run that you're seeing me commentate right now, but you'll get to see some slightly different versions that take them a little bit slower while going at the same speed at either the beginning or the end. So, in the case of this level, this is the last really follow the leader sort of level. After that, you won't see it again, as we're going to be rolling into the next layer level. Now, in the layer levels, got quite a few cycles that you have to meet, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. It just means we won't get to present this cool looking reverse conveyor belt strat where you can actually travel in the opposite direction you're intended to travel on the conveyor belt and catch a few extra fast cycles. Or as you can see, I actually take an intentional death by falling down the pit, and with enough cycles you can be well ahead of 5 minutes by the time you get into the ice levels. Now with the ice levels on World 3, we're getting to by far some of my favorite strats to pull off, since they'll be, quite frankly, what I think are crowd pleasers, because there are very few strats like them, and with the right timing, you can make very little movements, but, really just show what the game devs probably didn't think people were going to go after, with the exception of probably, this level. Level 3 is what we call the run killer. This is probably one of those levels that, you see me taking it fast in my submission, we'll probably have to slow it down just a little bit so we don't get hit by those flying fish. And there's quite a few chances that it could happen, so we may have to take the checkpoint there. It really will depend on how safe I feel like taking it, so. As of right now, there are 2 different ways you can handle this. I could do the stylish strats where I just hop a few steps to the right like I did on this level, and just hop all the way down to a safe landing pad, or I could just take it a little bit to the left where we'll have a bit of a safer path of travel that will only lose us a few seconds. Now in the case of this level, there's really only a few options. Trying to get to the edge as quickly as possible, where all our either penguin or otter friends, I'm not sure which they are, but you have a limited amount of time to catch that final cycle where you can just ride all 3 ice panels into the goal stage, which leads us to our 3rd layer. Now, there are very fast routes that you can take on this level, but it all depends on how good your input speed is for this game. It is incredibly difficult to keep up a good input speed, and there's a good chance that you'll lose it every now and then. So having some safety and knowing each of the bat patterns will help to prepare for if you do lose your input, so that you can just sort of adjust every now and then. So that is one thing I need to bear in mind, is that the way that I engage going faster or slower has everything to do with rhythm. So listening to the music is one way I do that. And we like to move in, if we were referring to a 4/4 meter, since I'm a musician, we would be thinking about it like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 through 3 when I'm hopping with Frogger. And you'll know kind of what I'm talking about when I hop from level to level. We try to utilize that rhythm as much as possible because it is the rhythm of hops that Frogger can make about nearly as fast as possible without losing too many inputs or having any go into ghost inputs, as I would probably call them. You could try to push it a little bit more towards 16ths instead of triplets, but 16ths does risk you misinputting, since this game can only take so many inputs at once. So this level here, as you can see, there's a bit of some waiting time, but not too much if you're going to go for the fastest all-out strats. I think what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to take it a little easy at varying points of level 4 of World 4, so that you can more easily, more comfortably get through the level without losing too many lives. Because with a game like Frogger, there is a good chance you're going to be losing a fair amount of lives while traveling through the game. So in order to prepare for that, we're going to probably end up just focusing on not trying to get as many game overs as possible. Of course, exceptions for when we make it to checkpoints. There are level checkpoints that you'll see that are highlighted, or you might have noticed are accented by these small blocks that have a C on them. As you might have noticed, I had a difficult maneuver to make that required me to make a few cycles fast enough. But back to the checkpoint. You notice there, I actually did grab the checkpoint. So if I had 0 lives or 1 life or only 2 lives remaining, I may have just opted to intentionally game over and then start right from the level I left off so that I can start with a full slate of lives. So the pressure is laid off for this particular level, which you have a couple of different cycles to meet. For one of them is, of course, to get past this bat. I did take it a bit more safely so that I could still get the cycle where you take an intentional death either by jumping off or jumping into the spider. And we go into what is the final stage, of course, which is the mines. This is the final world. I could go for that checkpoint, and it's probably a good marathon strat to do. It doesn't really lose you time to go for it, though if you're playing sloppy, you could miss input in the wrong direction. So I still feel like it's worthwhile, especially if you're running low on lives, and then you can just, like the last world or another checkpoint beforehand, you can have a full slate of lives available to work with. So with World 4, or with World 5, the final world, it's pretty straightforward. One thing that can impact the run is the nerves, so for commentary, I guess it would be useful to mention that, like, on a world record pace, or even on a pretty good pace, there can be quite a bit of pressure to perform at a high level and be able to carry the run all the way to completion. So that much I can say. This level in particular is a perfect example of where the pressure comes into play. There's just going to be some moments where you're going to have to just trust your gut and make the right decision when it comes to moving from minecart to minecart, because they all have different varying speeds, and the same goes for the spider. So you have to be just on top of your game to anticipate each of the minecarts as you go. So you can see 2 hops, another 2, one more, and we can catch the spider about as early as humanly possible as of right now. And this final level here is where the nerves really truly come into play. It's especially important not to miss input too much here. You have some leeway on the conveyor belt, but only if you feel like you're going to play it slightly safer. This level has quite a bit of time to save, but it's also one where you can play it a little bit safer and still make it look good for a marathon. So as we go down here, there's one last extra, like, sort of stylistic strat that you could go for where you actually go in reverse of what's intended. So in the case, I went for an early cycle, and that allows us to save around 3 to 5 seconds worth of time. These final conveyor belts can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but as so long as you get past those first 2, you generally make it to the finish. And with that, the 90% run is finished. As soon as we see the congratulations screen, that's it. So this is commentary for the 90% run, and I hope for your consideration you will hopefully give this game a chance, and perhaps Awesome Games Done Quick 2023 will be the very first marathon for which a Frogger game is featured. There's never been a Frogger speedrun at a GDQ, and I feel like my run that I showed off would be a pretty nice and quick and sweet run to present in the middle of a time slot for perhaps an obscure GBC period, depending on which category you want to assign it to, or even as a bonus. I still think it'd be cool to showcase just how fast players in the series can go. And this run in particular is about a good, I'd say, a little over 2 minutes behind the task. So even with just showing like 30 to 40% of the strats that I just showcased in this run for which I was commentating, I think I'd be able to put on a good showing. So I hope you and the rest of y'all at GDQ consider Frogger 2 for the Game Boy Color, either the All Gems category or the 90% category. The original runs without commentary can be found in the description below. Thank you, and have a good day.